What is the worst slash scariest thing that has woken you up? Back when I lived alone in a studio apartment, I used to wake to just about anything. Never woke up more terrified than the night when I woke up to the sound of my toilet flushing. To this day I can only assume that a ghost just couldn't hold it anymore. This is terrifying. Is it possible it was a neighbor's toilet? Nope, clear as day came from my bathroom. Woke up to scratching, chittering, and screeching at my second floor window. Sounded otherworldly. Got the courage to look outside. Saw two squirrels ducking on a tree branch. That's a lot of nuts. First was a phone call at 5 AM to let us know that 2 family members were killed by a drunk driver. Second was a smoke alarm as the entire basement was burning and the fire was almost at the top of the steps. We all barely made it out. I'm glad you're alive. The general alarm shrieking through the 1MC speaker right outside of my rack when I was on a submarine. Someone's clothes had caught fire in the dryer, the only one on the boat. I was deep asleep and woke up confused as hell, scared witless and choking on smoke. Just seeing the word fire and submarine in the same sentence gives me the heebie-jeebies. Woman screaming for her life. Luckily for her it was a big apartment complex and about 30 people got outside before they could shove her in the trunk. Her head was wrapped up in a duct tape mask. It was all quite ducked up. Me and my wife's bed was positioned so if the door to the kids' room was open you could see into their room from our bed. In the middle of the night I wake up for no apparent reason. Before turning over and returning to sleep I glance into our kids' room. I notice our daughter's bed is empty. Strange. I call out to her, no reply. As I call louder, my wife awakens and asks WTF I'm doing. I'm calling for Wilma, I reply. But honey, don't you remember, she died in the car crash, she tells me. As my world crumble and I'm overcome with pain and sorrow, I wake up again. For real this time. Our daughter is safely asleep in her bed. Worst nightmare ever, still gives me the chills. 10 or so years later. My daughter actually did die, and I've had several dreams of her being alive. Waking up and realizing she's still gone is like losing her all over again. My girlfriend's mother telling me there were 2 police officers and my mother at the front door. It was 4 AM, and I was sleeping at the girlfriend's house. They had come to inform me my dad had died. That was around 14 years ago. I'm afraid to say that I don't think this sort of wake up won't happen again. I had my mom wake me up in my freshman dorm room with 2 public safety officers and my aunt there to tell me my dad has passed away in the night. Truly awful way to wake up, and I feel for you. Apartment on fire. Actually this week is the 5th anniversary. We used to have this weird old Labrador that lived next door but would come sleep at us some nights. It was weird because it would stand on its hind legs and trot around for a bit before getting on all 4s again. One night I woke to what sounded like someone walking around the room. For about 5 seconds I completely shit myself thinking there was a child walking around my room before I realized it was that dog. I think it did it for food. My house trying to fall apart. I was remodeling a nightmare of a room in a 1925 house. Got into the walls, anyone who has done this knows what I'm talking about, and it was a nightmare. I removed the layer of plywood behind the drywall to see what the studs looked like. Well, the ducking plywood was holding up the walls. The studs had more or less disintegrated. So, the whole night I heard constant, loud settling noises, not normal ones. Loud pops, wood crunching, etc. Next morning I set up an exterior brace and that kept it sound long enough to properly repair it. Actually just happened last week. Woke up to my dog growling and someone was shining a light into my window at 2 AM. I was super out of it and trying to process what was going on since the light was coming from someone in my fenced-in backyard. Then my dog barked loud and the person ran away. Anyone here have one of those robotic vacuums? When the power goes out those duckers start wandering around lost, bumping into sheet. Absolutely terrifying thing to be woken up by at 3 in the morning. In grad school, my roommate standing directly over me, staring down at me, she couldn't decide if she should wake me up or not. She kept hearing this deep voice mumbling at inconsistent intervals and was torn between there's someone in the house and I'm finally actually losing my mind. She was studying psych at the time. We finally figured out that it was the smoke detector wanting new batteries, but good lord, it was terrifying /u/mickle squid. Remember this? My GF woke up and went to the bathroom in the middle of the night. When she came back she saw a shadow of someone sitting up. She was terrified and couldn't move. Turn out that dark shadow was her sister, who woke up and saw a dark shadow standing looking at her. They both were staring at each other thinking they were seeing ghost. This isn't bad or scary, just strange. I was once woken up by a snail. I was sleeping in a room in the basement. One morning, I was woken up by a sound that went squeak like a squeegee. Tap, 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 squeak, tap, tap, tap. I couldn't figure out what was making the sound, so I looked around the room. When I looked out the window, I saw that a snail was crawling across it and making the sound. The squeak was the snail moving. The tap came from its shell knocking against the glass. My 2-year-old standing over me with a kitchen knife. He wanted sliced apples at 4 o'clock in the morning and somehow managed to climb up on table and pull out a knife. Now we keep them in the cupboard. Dang, kids are terrifying. Most of these stories are about super creepy children waking up their parents. I've woken up several times to the sound of tornado sirens going off in the middle of the day. They test them on the first Wednesday of every month, but when they wake you up your first thought isn't what day it is. Same here, they constantly test those damn sirens at random times without any warning. I work at a summer camp, and one of those tornado sirens are right outside of the main cabin, so when the first Wednesday came around I was deafened. My husband put on Insidious then left the room. I woke up to the screechy loud violins, and I was so startled I literally fell out of bed. Ha 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 ha. A few years back I hear a thud in the hallway and my 4-year-old daughter screaming in pain. She had fallen and gotten a small but deep cut just above her left eyebrow. When I got out to the hallway, her face, hands, and pajamas were covered in blood, and she was holding her hands against her face. I thought she lost her eye. A quick trip to the ER for a couple of stitches, and she was right as rain, but I gained almost all of my grey hair that night. While studying abroad in undergrad, I was staying the night in a hostel in Barcelona. The room I was in was fairly small, probably about 6 bunks. Was sleeping soundly when I suddenly woke up choking, covered in some unknown powder and hearing a loud whooshing sound. Turns out, an extremely drunk Australian decided to spray a fire extinguisher in the room. A spider landing on my face. In retrospect, the little guy was probably as terrified as I was. Think it had accidentally fallen somehow, but goddamn it was scary. Edit. Well, hot damn. This blew up. TL. Doctor for the replies. Spiders do this shit a lot. That's happened to me before, and I couldn't go back to sleep for like 2 hours. Only 2 hours? I'd never have slept again. It's a toss up between a few, but I once woke up after a party at my house to a guy leaning over me saying, "Don't worry, I didn't grape you." My dog barking only once in a low voice. He will generally go wild if someone is in front of the door or passes through the hallway. Then sitting up in a way he never does and staring at the door. Nothing happened. It was scary as duck, cause it was everything that he usually does not do. Things that are off are scarier than grotesque things that happen emo. One time I woke up to my hamster running in his wheel. Normal, right? Well, the wheel was on the floor, and his cage was on a shelf, which means that he had in some way gotten out of his cage and jumped from about a meter up, and he became blind in one eye. Nothing else really happened. I was just pretty scared for the rest of his life that he could escape from his cage at any time. BTW, he opened his eye again after about 6 months. Nothing scary, just pretty weird. One time my son woke me in the middle of the night, crawling into my bed and telling me a man was bothering him. I usually try to go banish the monsters in his room so he can go back to sleep in there. So I went and admonished the air, "Leave my son alone. This isn't your place." This time my son wanted to stay in my room, and not go back to his own bed, so I made room for him and moved over to the edge of my bed and fell back asleep. About 30 minutes later, I had a frightening lucid dream that this tall, shrouded man was at the side of my bed and started jabbing at my side, telling me that I interrupted his fun and now he was going to bother me. I couldn't move, and I just had to put up with it until I was able to get my dream life willpower to focus and let me move out.